What your sexual behaviors and preferences are may not be related to your sexual orientation or identity. So when people say what you just said, well, if everybody's having queer sex, then what does that mean about queer theory? We're talking about queer sex. That's not queer identity.
Hello, everyone. Queer relationships, queer joy. Thanks for coming back again. We are super stoked to have a guest today, Dr. Joe Court, and we're going to give him a minute to introduce himself. But we also check in because I feel like Melissa and I have a little bit of catching up to do, and we invite you, Joe, to jabber with us for a minute. We do a quick little check-in before we get started because this is all about relationships. And we are inviting guests to hear about the normalizing dynamics, all different types of relationship styles and dynamics. And we've been on this journey of dating and relationship styles and talking about sex and non-monogamy and all different types of things. And so before we do introductions, Melissa, is there anything that we want to update listeners?
They'll be bored with me. I'm still working on relationship with self. That's still a theme for me, also dating. And I think the relationship with self is really, I kind of said this last time we recorded, but with the brief revisit of winter that we got in Portland last week, I got launched back into that introspection and, newsflash, there's more work to do.
Well, let's start off introducing ourselves. And Joe, will you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, so I am Dr. Joe Court. I've been a therapist in May. It'll be 37 years. I know it's a long time. I should have never been a therapist at 22 years old. That was a mistake, I was green but that's how it was. You get your master's. Got it young, but over time I have become more LGBT informed and kink informed. I deal a lot with trauma and abuse, a lot with male sexuality, a lot with male sexual fluidity. And in that, I have also grown. I've written several books. I also have a group practice here in Detroit, Michigan. And that's been going on since 2009. And I do a lot of things in the field. I think it's a great field. There's lots of ways to diversify your interests.
I know. Well, I think about how long you've been doing. I'm like, you do it more than double the time I've been doing. That's so awesome.
Well, one time I had a student say to me that I was doing it her whole life. I was like, oh my God, I never thought she was like 36 or 37 years old. I was like, oh my God.
Well, I'm Keely Helmick. I am the owner of Connective Therapy Collective. I'm a queer, non-binary femme, and I don't even know how much to talk about my relationship right now. So I'm just going to hold it. I think it's interesting dealing with breakups in non-monogamy. So that's a curious one. Not to delve into it too much, but just DC is not part of this conversation anymore. So we'll leave it at that. So some breaking of plans that I thought I had and navigating all of that stuff. So Melissa, do you want to quickly introduce yourself as we always do, just in case someone's new to listening?
I'm Melissa. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I work at Connective Therapy Collective. I'm bisexual, polyamorous. I use she, they pronouns, and gender fluid. And I think that's all. I already gave an update. Relationship with self. That's my big focus.
Yeah, I think mine's back to relationship with self for a while. I think that was my big takeaway of the weekend.
We've named the whole autonomy versus connection and not making those verses, but can you be in connection and be autonomous?
Yes.
And I will name that with somebody I'm dating, I had that exact conversation. So that was fun to be very transparent that here's what I'm working on. What do you think about that? So
yeah.
Hey, it's Cardinal, your behind the scenes buddy, but also your in front of the scenes buddy, because I'll be recording a special Mother's Day episode with Keely, Melissa, and my mom, Willow. So keep an eye out for that. But anyways, I'm here now to let you know that if you're needing to have a conversation about autonomy versus connection, we have a tool to help you facilitate that. It's our free relationship check-in worksheet, and the link is in the description. All right, back to the show.
For sure.
Cool. Yeah.
Well, and I think speaking of relationships and the longevity of relationships, Joe, one of the reasons I was really excited to talk with you is because you have a love story that has been over, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's over 20 years that you've, the two of you,
29.
29 years.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And we love, I mean, that's the thing, hearing stories about long-term relationships and what's going well. So will you tell us your story? How did
Yeah.
the two of you get together? Let's hear it.
I love to tell the story. It's very sweet. To me, it's very sweet. All of us feel that way, about, I think about when you first meet your partner. But so we were both, I was 30, he was 37. He was just coming out. And, the rule in our community is don't date somebody just coming out. They're going to have to go through all the stages, and then they have to go through their adolescence, their gay adolescence. And I did stay away from most people like that. But there was something about him. I just thought it's worth the risk. There was a vulnerability in his face and in the way he expressed himself. When he actually pursued me, which is going to be weird when I tell you our story, but he would make sure he was around me all the time. I think today we would call it cringy. Maybe back then I would have said a little creepy, but it didn't feel creepy. But
Yeah.
wherever I looked, he was staring at me. Wherever we went out afterwards at the gay community center, he was next to me.
Mhm.
And he was kind of awkward. That's what I saw it as awkward. And
Yeah.
it really was. And then we went on our first date. When two guys or two women go on a date, you don't really know, is this a date? Is this a friendship? Unless you've established it in some way.
Yeah.
So he looked at me and he said, is this a date? And I was like, nobody ever says that. That's such a vulnerable thing to say. So I looked at him and I said, I'd like it to be a date if you would like it. I'm considering it one. He said, yes, I would. And then the next time we went out, he looked at me within the first half hour together. He said, are we still dating? They're vulnerable and open and honest, which I don't come from a family of like that. I'm very much like that. I crave people like that. What I did not know at the time, nor did he, it was 1993, is that he was on the autism spectrum. And back then we would call it Asperger's, but we were diagnosing kids, not adults.
Mhm.
And we didn't know, and he didn't know until over time. And we had lots of problems because we were a neurodiverse couple. He's neurodivergent, I'm neurotypical. And we would go to therapy and people would say, it looks like he's more of an engineer brain and you have more of an emotional
Like
brain.
creative, emotional.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was true, but it was not the full story. So we never really got the right therapy between us.
Mm.
And we almost broke up many times because we just were so different until 2012. It started to click for me. I was getting adult clients who were diagnosed with Asperger's. We don't use that word anymore, but that is
Yeah.
what the word was.
Sure.
Yeah.
And, I started realizing Mike had those traits. And I saw this movie called Adam. And Adam is all about an adult man with Asperger's and how and the very first scene, there were maybe two scenes that didn't apply to Mike. And once I realized, and we were watching Big Bang, so Sheldon was just like Mike. Like that's who I'm married to, is that guy, Sheldon.
Yeah.
And then once I realized that 50% or more of our problems died down because he was predictable, understandable. I always knew he was trying hard, but I couldn't really, I always thought if you're trying hard, then why can't you do it?
Yeah.
He just couldn't do and couldn't say. And anyway, so that's kind of been the main story of our relationship is acceptance of the neurodiversity.
Acceptance of the neurodivergency. Okay. Yeah. And
That's
I mean, you've made
beautiful.
it 29 years.
Yeah. And we've had lots of, really good times, but also really scary times where he looked at me once and said, you're too angry. I don't want to be with somebody that's angry. I don't know if I can go on. And I would turn to him years later and I had to work on that. And I'd say, I need somebody more emotionally available. I know it's hard on you, but these are the things it looks like. And he had to do that a little bit more. Like couples think if you get to these points that you need to break it off, and you can talk about breaking it off, but you can come back together. And that's what we've been able to do.
Yeah. And especially during a time, I mean, so can you put into context? I'm trying to do the math in my head. So 90s is when you met, right? What year
Yep.
did you meet?
93. Mm-hmm.
93. Yeah. So putting that into perspective too, where we're at culturally as two gay men and what was going on
It was actually a perfect time. It was, I think Clinton was the president and he was doing the don't ask, don't tell, and nobody liked that at the time, but it was at least putting visibility of gay male couples. And I remember seeing, even we went to a gay pride march on Washington, and it was the best time to have met somebody. Gay pride and gay life, LGBT life was coming to another level, and the world was coming to another acceptance. It really was great.
So it's really exciting.
Yeah, and there was, There was more visibility. Will and Grace was on TV. It was a time for pride. I really am grateful that it was that point in my life. Plus, I had all my 20s to date all the losers that got me to Mike. You know what I mean? Like, there were lots of, I mean, I was like, oh my God, dating is brutal, right? And I remember in my 20s thinking, am I ever going to find someone? And then I found him, and it was perfect timing.
When you started dating, how long did it take before the two of you like moved in together? What was your timeline? I think it's always interesting to hear those.
Yeah, so here's the thing. So it sounded normal, but if you put the autism spectrum on, it was even more normal for that. Normal in the sense that he already owned a house. I was
Yeah.
just starting a private practice. And so I was living in a tiny little apartment. He had this big house in a nice neighborhood that I never thought I'd live in. It wasn't very Jewish. I'm Jewish. He already had put a lot of money into designing his home. So there was like one room available that was not designed. And I didn't really appreciate any of that because even though I'm Jewish, people have misconceptions that because you're Jewish, you're rich or you have money or you're, middle class. And I was
Yeah.
working class, no money, mother's secretary. So I didn't really appreciate the money that he had put into this house. And I remember thinking, he'll either sell the house or we'll burn the furniture with this Georgian style crap that I didn't like at the time. I was more modern. I was young. And anyways, we fought over that for a long time. It was a year and a half before we decided, yes, I'll move in. And he would not let me touch a thing. I wasn't able to move a knickknack or put a knickknack except if it was in this one room in this house. And I agreed to it with the understanding that I'm not going to pay towards your mortgage. I'll pay for everything but towards your mortgage. And then when we decide, and that'll be my money to either move out or I'll put toward the house when we're ready. And we had like a 2-year agreement around that. That was just how we did it. And it worked.
That sounds so sensible.
And that's the thing about Mike is he's way more sensible than me. And I like sensibility. I just don't have the brain for it. So it worked out. I like that word.
Yeah. And also, I mean, your age, I mean, I think that's different. You said you're, already 30 versus being like 22 or 25 and brushing. I mean, that timeline sounds very reasonable. And how many people do we know, queer couples that jump in, 3 months, 6 months, and you're like, and then it burns out.
Yeah.
Ignites quickly, burns out quickly.
It totally does. He wasn't going to do that. He was being very cautious. I wasn't going to do that. But I did know. I knew sooner than him because I had dated so many different guys. I knew I didn't want someone in the circuit community. I didn't want some hookup guy culture. Not that there's anything wrong with that if that's your life. It wasn't mine. And back then, I don't know that I'm so much like this now. Back then, I wanted heteronormativity as a gay man. I wanted a house, a marriage, a husband. I wanted everything my sister had. I wanted my life to look heteronormative. Today, I don't give a shit about that. Back then, it was important to me, and Mike was like that.
Yeah. Can you describe that a little more, what that shift? So at the time that because again, speaking culturally, that makes sense in that time period of wanting to be accepted and be part of the normative, part of socially normative things. What was that like for the two of you? And did you feel like you reached that status? And when did it change?
Yeah, I feel like we did reach that status. Absolutely. And because we lived in a nice neighborhood, my demands to be seen as a couple in my family were met and by coworkers. And over time, he would come to things and people would invite us together as spouse. So we worked hard. I think we both had a little bit of activism in us so that we worked really hard to make that happen for us.
Yeah.
And then, it was fine until we had a marriage. We had a Jewish wedding, even though he's not Jewish. We had our parents there. It was really all the things that I wanted to do as a couple. And then probably after our marriage, that was in 2000, maybe, I don't know, 2015, 16, 17. I think we had done it all and it was enough. Nothing really changed for him. He was still wanting all that. But for me, I had other needs, other wants, but I didn't want to not be with him, but I wanted to go out and I didn't mind the visibility that somebody might not see me as heteronormative anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Funny how that can happen after marriage. That was my experience when I was previously married. We did kind of all the relationship escalator. And then like a year after marriage, we kind of looked at each other like, all right, now what? Like we did all the things. Like granted, we didn't have children, but it's like, all right, well, Facebook official and all the ways that the public wants to see. And like, now what do we want to do with our lives? I checked all the boxes.
Yeah, pretty normal probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so was that time period, because you have mentioned that you are a non-monogamous couple, was that when that shifted around that time?
Yeah, so for me, I had identified many years as a sex addict because I had unwanted kinky sexual desires, fetish and desires. And Mike knew all about that. And Mike was not interested in it. And I didn't want to do it with him. So we had like a vanilla life together. And I was sort of marginalizing my other, trying to give myself an eroticectomy, I call it, right? Where trying to slice this out of me.
That's a great word, Joe. Yeah.
Because there's no such thing. You can't do it. And
Yeah.
I realized, and I looked at him one day and I said, I really want to do this. I loved it when I was doing it. I just was out of control at the time because no one helped me. Nobody helps you be kinky. You know, we have kids come through and teens who are naturally kinky, but it's not seen as natural because they're so young. Like, how could it be natural as a young kid? Mine was natural. That's my orientation. That's who I, you know.
Yeah.
And if you don't help them understand it, then they're going to act out and do and impulsively. You know what I mean? They're not going to do it in a way that is healthy for them and healthy expression of it.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I said to him, I no longer want to identify this way. I don't think I'm a sex addict. I think I'm just a kinky person who wants to act on that, but not with you. And could we look at opening our relationship? I have zero and still has been zero interest in romantically bonding with any of these guys. I think I'm romantically monogamous, sexually non-monogamous. That's
Yeah.
me.
That's really helpful. And I appreciate your sharing that because I think a lot of people will have different variations of those feelings with a long-term partner and not know how to navigate that. And then it sounds like, so your spouse, he's down with this, and did the two of you, and you don't have to answer this, but I start asking
away.
these questions. I'm curious because I think when people hear one of the things going on, I just actually read this on a feed today. It's like, you know, as soon as you open up the relationship, it changes. It's going to change the relationship no matter what. So I'm curious how it changed your relationship and how did you make it work? Like we're looking at these successful, maybe a loaded word, but looking at the two of you together still thriving, what helped that? How did it work?
And I can't speak for all couples because everyone's so different.
Of course,
but for us, he knew what it was. He knew what I was going to do. He didn't really want to know about it. We had a don't ask, don't tell. I really didn't want to tell anyways because I know he didn't appreciate it or it wasn't in his schema to enjoy anything that I was doing.
Yeah.
And he just said to me, I'm okay with this as long as you're safe and don't bring anything back here. And you know, that's it. And we had like a secure attachment. I guess that's what I would say. That's one of the things I did not grow up with. So I think that's why I was drawn to maybe hit his autism spectrum, because you get security when you marry somebody and you partner with somebody autistic. You can just feel it. And I love that. And it made me more secure. But I remember even saying to him, if you're not open to this, then we probably can't stay together because I do have to do this. It's like your orientation may include autism. My orientation includes kink and fetish. And I have to have that scratched. I can't deny it anymore.
You know, even without him wanting to know details, it still sounds like the foundation of your relationship had so much communication and vulnerability and just honesty. I even heard you talk about like agreements with the first living situation. So in some ways, like you were both primed, you know, for this anyway.
You know, I've never had somebody say that to me. And I really appreciate you framing it that way because one of our arguments used to be that he doesn't talk much. I'll say to him, why do you love me? And he'll say, I don't know. I can't say. I just do. Like there was no communication. Like that's no words. Just give me 5 words. Today he still can. But he does communicate. It's just not in the typical way that you would think. Yeah.
And so when you brought that into your relationship, that understanding, that recognition of like, oh, this is what's going on. So he had never been told that either.
That he had autism?
Yeah.
No, he didn't know what it was. Nobody knew what it was. And, you know, as a therapist, I used to think, oh, what did your mother do to you? What kind of trauma did you have? What kind of abuse? I was sticking to that story. But there was nothing. Every time I looked at his family and asked about his past, there was really nothing. And it was really this. And you could see as a child, in early pictures, he smiles, smile, and the smiles go away in puberty. That's very typical of autistic kids. Very typical. And I thought it was trauma, but it wasn't.
So being that, can I call you an elder of the queer community?
You can. I'm not bothered.
Well, I think it's an honor. I mean, we're not the podcast to go through the whole history of the LGBTQIA, but we can say that it is really beautiful to see folks who are at this stage and be able to learn. And I know not everyone would say this. I mean, Joe, social media, all the things are so focused on like younger age groups than me. I'm only 41, but so focused on that. And I'm curious, and I haven't asked this question before, but I'm curious if there's things you say to younger folks, or there's things that you would say to people now having your experience, knowing what you know in your relationship, the ways that you've worked through it together. Like, are there things that if someone was sitting next to you or in front of you, a young person, words of advice, or just what went well, what's working well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I do try to do these things. A lot of young people are not open to it. They see it as predatory, even when you try to just be friendly about it. And so I guess I don't know. I guess it would depend on the advice, but maybe mostly that we're not raised gay, right? Like I was raised Reformed Jew. I knew what kind of Jew I was. I knew what kind of Judaism worked for me as an adult because I was raised that way. When you're not raised gay, you're just gay, and then you have to go find your people. You don't know who your people are. Like, what kind of gays am I? What kind of gay am I? Who do I want to hang out with? And I guess for the young people, I'd like to help them not feel so pressured to have to be in certain groups or be a certain way. And that's what I love about what I've done with my life is I've made it my way. I just did it exactly how I wanted it to be. And then when it changed, I changed. I didn't feel like any gay peer pressure kind of thing.
That's really lovely.
Yeah. As you said that too, it made me think of the comment about sexuality too. And like, we're not necessarily raised as sexual beings. Like we have this way of teenagers and kids have no sexual impulses. And I guess by doing that, we've talked a lot about shame on this podcast. And it feels like similarly, if we're not raised gay, if we're not raised sexual, then we accumulate some sort of shame or fear around those things that we then have to work through. So I love that mission.
I do too. You made me think of something when I was, one thing I do notice, and I guess it's negative. I don't mean to be negative, but it really is true. When I was a young gay guy, every gay and lesbian person, back then we just said gay and lesbian, right? We didn't say LGBT. Everybody thought they were the expert on everything, and you were not. Okay? It's gotten worse now. Now in the L and the G and the B and the T, everybody, and it's like, oh my God, there is a lot of expertise out there, but don't tell me that I don't have expertise too. Like in the Jewish community, we buoy each other up. Oh, you're in, let's hear from you. In the LGBT community, we push down. I'm the expert. I can't stand it, and I can't understand why it got worse. But it's a lot worse than 30 years ago.
Social media popped up in my brain automatically, and like, I wonder if it is that fear of shame. Like I have to be the expert to prove that this is okay. And so I have to be right. And I have to know everything. If it's that, feels like it's coming from a fear space of having to tell somebody else how to do their life. That's just a projection, right?
Yes.
Of like your own stuff.
Yes. Instead of, hey, yeah, you are an expert, but I am too. We can both be experts without canceling each other.
Yeah.
I was going to say cancel culture. But I was also going to ask how this informs, because you work with couples. How does this inform you work with couples? Do you work with a variety of couples? I mean, on TikTok, we know what your specialty is, but.
Yeah, right. I do work with a variety. It's gotten a little more specialized because of my being on TikTok. But I've worked with gay couples, lesbian couples, mixed orientation couples. I primarily work with straight couples. A lot of people don't believe that because all my work is gay and I'm gay. But, even straight people will call my office and say, do you see straight people? And I have to say, like the kid in The Sixth Sense, I see straight people. There's one thing. Of course I do. I didn't come from some gay planet, land here, and then learn your habitat. I figured my whole life.
Yeah. I mean, like in our community in Portland, I don't know what it's like in Detroit, Michigan, but in Portland, the dating pool, like if I only saw queer people specifically, I'm already like not being able to date a lot of people. So that would just leave me Seattle and Victoria, BC.
It's not ideal.
Same here. And as I've gotten older, I used to be able to talk about the kind of couples I saw, the way two gay men relate and joke about it, the way two women relate and joke about it. As I've gotten older, my white, male, cisgender profile has eclipsed my gay profile, so that when I talk about lesbian couples, I don't even do it anymore. I don't joke about it anymore. I even tried it on TikTok. I toned down my joking, And just what I said, I really felt was an honoring. Oh my God. The lesbians of TikTok came after me. It was awful because all they see is this white male cisgender. They don't. And then I was trying to defend myself, but I'm a gay guy and I've been working with gay lesbian couples and I know that it didn't matter. It's really gotten kind of ugly, I think.
Well, it's interesting because I was just listening to a podcast today. We're having gay sex, and the host Ashley was saying the only reason she gets away with the joke she says is because she's a woman, she's a lesbian. So there is something to be said about intersectionality and also like where we can say things and can we just have some compassion? And yes, we can talk about things, but yeah, Joe, you have quite the following on TikTok and you get lots of inflammatory comments.
I
You
do.
get lots of people commenting.
Oh boy.
Well, and I think, I mean, I'm going to bring it up because we have some time and we're talking about relationships and couples. And I do, because I don't like to cancel cult. I'm not a part of the cancel culture for the most part. And I mean, one of your things is that men having sex with other men. And I think that specialty, especially in the dynamics of couples. So I'm assuming you see in that piece, does that come up with your couples when you're working with them? Do
Well, yeah, a
people
lot
come
of
out to their spouse?
No, well, the coming out happens because the wife discovers it through the internet, through all the emails or something. It's been like I have a whole book about it. And I remember I had a writer help me, and the writer said, how come every time a guy tells his wife he's caught? And because men don't want to share about this. It's straight men who have sex with men. And even though there's more and more and more research, it's current research now that's just coming out about why straight people have gay sex, people can't hear me. It's very controversial. To me, it's such a simple concept. We know that gays and lesbians have heterosexual sex. They're very capable of being sexual with another gender, but not the other way around.
Well, and that lends to then it's interesting to think because like, and we're not, this isn't the topic of the day, but it does lend itself to think there's queer theory that says if everyone's queer, then there's not actually queer. And it lends itself to think, what if actually everyone is some kind of sexuality that just includes all different kinds of genders or expression? And if we were actually able to express how we want to in that moment, is there even anything such as queer? And this may get me canceled, but because I think that's what that brings up for me when you talk about it, when I see your, pieces, or when I haven't read your book, I'll admit it, but I've heard you speak, I've seen you in, classes, and that I think that's the piece. It almost hits on an identity piece.
Well, and this is what makes me crazy. I love that you just brought this up. So I was part of a generation before me and a little bit after me to help people understand that what you do in bed doesn't make who you are in terms of your identity. There are two different things. What your sexual behaviors and preferences are may not be related to your sexual orientation or identity. So when people say what you just said, well, if everybody's having queer sex, then what does that mean about queer theory? We're talking about queer sex. That's not queer identity. So just because a straight person has sex with the same sex doesn't mean they're queer or that they're not straight. Because what we do in bed doesn't inform, it can, but it doesn't automatically inform who we are and how we self-identify,
That's a cool distinction. That hasn't entered my brain before. So I really appreciate you saying it. Because I think I would have framed, Keely, your statement, but the other way, as the resident bisexual, right? I'm like, everyone's queer. What are you talking about? But it is a good distinction. Yeah. Thank you.
Everyone's capable of bisexual sex. It doesn't mean everybody's bi.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, and then that was because I have heard, and the piece that I think about is people will ask, depending on how a person is sexually, how that defines gender, and does what we do in bed define gender, what we do sexually define gender, especially with non-binary queer folks or cis women that are lesbians. There's this distinction. And so I think this lends itself to a much bigger discussion, but I am seeing, I hope people are listening and thinking about this, because it does. What I would like to see is a more fruitful conversation and not just cutting off, because I know my gut instinct. I think I've told you this, Joe. I was like, but that means they're gay or they're bi. And I really really want to label them. And so I will say that what is refreshing about this right now is that can we sit with this and have a full conversation with it? And can I set my assumption or my gut reaction of where it feels like my identity is being threatened? Because it's not about my identity.
Right.
It's about somebody else, but it does feel like that when I'm talking about it.
I think because the culture's gotten, I didn't even know this till I got on TikTok, how much the young people feel like what you do in bed is who you are. I remember going, wait, how did this happen? Because people always assume that my being gay, now their mind goes automatically to what I do in bed. What I do in bed is maybe related to being gay, but like, for instance, I'm very out about this. I've never had anal intercourse. I'm not into topping. I'm not into bottoming. It's never even crossed my mind as a young man. And so I call myself a side. I've come out with that term, right? Does that mean I'm not really gay because I'm not having queer sex? And the straight men who are having queer sex and getting pegged by their wives? Like, to me, I know that I don't mean to be contemptuous as I'm saying this. I'm not trying to be. It boggles my mind that people would decide that what you're doing informs who you are. I don't know.
Totally. Well, and what my mind goes to is, what about asexual people? Like, if you're not having sex, does that mean you don't get an orientation?
Well, right. Because you can be asexual, but you can also be gay and asexual, or lesbian and asexual. Exactly.
Yeah.
No, that's really helpful. And I think when we're able to have more words to describe things, and we really take ownership that an individual gets to define themselves, just as then we can have these fuller discussions. And I'm just having all these thoughts, like relationship wise, because I do think I remember being in a consultation group and someone was talking about a client, and the client was a non-binary AFAB person who really, and it was pansexual, and really wanted their AMAB, cis male. And they just said, please fuck me like I'm queer. And like, if you could people can just have sex in that way, all inclusively, that, yeah, maybe like anal play is a great one when you talk about like cis men, and with whether they're with women or with men, but especially if they're with women and they're romantically orientated to wanting to date and be married to women, but still find pleasure if they're getting pegged, if the woman has a strap on, the woman wearing the strap on, that doesn't make her gay. Like, a woman using a strap on does not make her gay.
It doesn't say anything about her gender either.
It doesn't say anything about gender. Yeah.
No, and I've had many lesbians in my office who have rape fantasies by straight men, trained up straight men.
Yeah.
Now, right, so you're even nodding. Does that make her not lesbian? Fuck no. She's a lesbian who has rape fantasies. It's politically incorrect, and it's your erotic orientation versus your sexual orientation. Her sexual orientation is lesbian. Her erotic orientation includes rape fantasies, and she doesn't even want to be raped. It's a fantasy.
Yeah.
It almost makes me want to change like the sexual orientation. Like, can it just be our like connective orientation, or like, is there another word that we won't confuse it so much?
Well, I think, Joe, with Doug Braun Harvey, one of the things that, there's so many things about him that's awesome. And I remember when I first took his training many years ago, it really did stick out to me when he said that when someone hears the word gay or lesbian or bisexual, sexual's in the bisexual term, they automatically think about sex and then stop listening. That was the piece that really got me. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
And I think that's still true, that, in certain, because people have such a hard time talking about sex. And so if they're just thinking about us as these like overtly sexual beings, and that's all we do or think about, because of course, if you're, queer, that's all you do. No, that's how we're being seen.
I was just thinking about this yesterday because I live in a non-Jewish area, right? So everyone's wishing me happy Easter, and I'm very politely correcting them, saying, thank you, I'm Jewish. People are like, oh, happy Passover. But when someone assumes that I'm straight and they talk about my wife, and I say, oh, no, I'm not. I don't have a wife. I have a husband. I'm gay. People have what do you mean? Why do I have to know that? What are you telling me that for? Dude, I'm not gay. Like, wait a minute. I'm just, because their mind goes immediately to sex, just like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like, oh my gosh, why are you telling me about your sex life? You're like, I'm not. I'm literally just telling you. I don't want it. You don't get to know that.
Just like telling you I'm Jewish, I'm not going to convert you and give you a bris and a mitzvah right here. I'm not going to,
Well, Joe, I really appreciate this today. I love your insight. We're going to have you back on to talk more about specifically all of the therapy type things that I love hearing about your story with your husband. And it's really nice to hear all people of all walks of life who get through 29 years together. It's just beautiful. We do like to wrap up. Our thing is to talk about our queer joy of the week. And when we say queer joy, like people will ask, kind of like how we were just talking about like orientation and all these different things. What does it mean for queer joy? Well, we call it queer joy. It just means something happened joyful to you. You're queer, we're queer. Like, so. And Melissa or I usually start off. Joe, if a story comes to your mind, you can start, but we'll start it off to have a sample.
How are you feeling, Keely? I have my queer joy. I'm still living my queer joy, so I can go first. But I
feel
also,
like you should, because I'm in breakup mode, and so my brain is wanting to. This is the challenge to identify the queer joy from separate from the sadness. Yeah,
cool. Well, I will kick it off then. I'm still, like I said, I'm still living it. It was so wonderful. So as a person working in capitalism, I believe in taking time off. And I do have some kind of official time off coming at the end of May. And I hit the point last week where I was like, that's too long. I can't wait that long. And so I was able to pull a half day last Friday. I didn't have to move things around too much. And I took myself on a date to a tulip farm. That was about an hour south of me. So I forgot how much I love road trips too. I haven't been out of Portland in a long time. So that was part of my story is I'm an ex-musical theater person. So I sang Wicked from my house all the way to the tulip farm. So if that's not already stereotypically queer joy. And I was there for like 5 hours because I wanted to see the sunset. And then we had a full moon rising. Oh my gosh, it was incredible. And just to be in solitude, it was like 5 hours of mindfulness because I really wasn't doing anything but being present and taking photographs, and some really good people watching too. I just was so grateful. I've said on the podcast, especially I think at the beginning of the year, really focused on self dates and figuring out what I like and what I enjoy. And this was a little bit bigger than just going to a movie. This was like a whole afternoon, and it was great. So I'm going to make a tradition of it now.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah.
I would say that my queer joy of last week was very much about meeting new people. And then I did have a really I have an old friend we've known each other since we were 12. I was trying to do the math. So it's been, I'm not doing math, over 25 years, 27 years, whatever. And he has 3 kids, and we got together and I had met a new friend, and we're all hanging out, and we closed the bar down. And I was like, and everyone who knows me is like, oh my gosh, Keely, like you were up. Like I usually fall asleep between 9 and 10 at night. So they were like, you were up till 2:30 in the morning. And I mean, that in itself was kind of joyful. Not joyful the next morning, but really was about the connection. And I think that one of the things that I have noticed as we talk about this focus of relationship with self, and then I've been in a more non-monogamous dating, is that I'm creating so much more room for my friendships than when I was monogamous. And that's part of the challenge with the queer relationship dynamic and the toxic part of the toxic monogamy. But I just really am seeing so much more room for that. And I'm very, very joyful about those connections and those new connections as well.
It's wonderful.
Oh, I like that. I would say, I know this is going to sound arrogant. I was thinking, should I say it or not? But it is what it is. I went to Austin, Texas to see Diana Ross. She was playing there, 17 years old. It was really fun.
Oh
really
my
fun.
gosh. Oh my gosh.
And we went to a gay bear bar, and it was pretty packed actually. And I was recognized there as the queer TikTok doc.
Oh my gosh.
Let me tell you why I like that, because every 10 years you kind of go out, like I've written books, I was popular, and then nobody knew me again. And then I did this and people knew me. So now TikTok's giving me another breath. And it was kind of fun. Kind of having people say, oh my God, I like your stuff, or, about whatever. So that was my queer joy
That's
in a gay
awesome.
bear bar.
Oh, that's amazing. Yes, for sure. There's so much ageism in our culture. And I think it's fabulous that you are out there, the age you're at, and what, above 40, oh my God, and above 50, oh my goodness. Like so much, like there's all this talk of fear, people in their 20s, like, oh my God, when I hit 40, or, I can't imagine what it'll be like when I'm 40. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. And I'm so glad that you're just, and you're living life. And I think not only you're showing people that you have this relationship that's lasted, and it's also like, as a gay man, you're going out and living your life. It's not about age.
I'm going to be like Cher. I'm never going away.
Yeah. Well, on that note, Joe, is there anything that you would have upcoming, or any information that you want to make sure and share with the listeners so they can check you out?
That is a good question. Well, I mean, if somebody's listening and they're gay, or they're a man, they don't have to be gay, a man who doesn't like penetrative sex and wants to be a part of our Facebook group, it's called Side Guys, and it's private and people can join that. We have 4,600 members in there now, which from all over the world, of guys who just don't get into penetrative sex.
Beautiful.
And I might write another book about that, so that sort of give that name and put that out there. But otherwise, I'm pretty much focused on my group practice and making TikToks.
Awesome. Well, and you can all find Joe is very easy to find on TikTok. And thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, ladies.
Thank you
I shouldn't say ladies, right? Because
Good job. You caught yourself.
Thanks for having me, folks. How's that? That's better.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, y'all. And I hope everyone has a queer and joyful week.
Thanks for listening to Queer Relationships, Queer Joy, a podcast by the Connective Therapy Collective, hosted by Keely C. Helmick and Melissa DeSeguron. I'm your producer, Cardinal Marking. Audio is edited by Mars Gasper. Intro music is by Bad Snacks. This week's guest was Dr. Joe Court. Find Joe on his Facebook group, Side Guys, and on TikTok at Dr. Joe Court. If this episode made you smile or think, tell us about it. If you hated it, tell us about that. Review us on iTunes or Spotify. Or send us an email at info@connectivetherapycollective.com. For more queer joy, visit our website at www.connectivetherapycollective.com. Love ya. Bye.